Ladies. Ah, look at my bashed nose. I mean, look at it. Come on. I look like a bloody hobo. Hi everybody, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. So this video's a few days in the making, but I really wanted to slowly and methodically go through the informations which we're going to discuss, which of course is this extensive article by Kotaku as regards to what went wrong with Anthem. Spoilers. Very obvious stuff. But still very fascinating to read. It's a very good article by Jason Schreier. Full disclosure, don't have a lot of time for the person. He kind of showed his true colours when he went for an interview with Yong Ye. And yeah, although he writes well and he does good articles and he gets the information as a person, got a lot to be desired. Fingers crossed in the future that might change, but who knows? For right now, not so much. So I chuckle because I want to choose my words carefully here because I don't want to be unfair. But let's just be perfectly honest. When Anthem released and when we actually managed to get our hands on Anthem, it was very clear to, I think, pretty much everybody that there was nothing. I've stressed this so many times now. Nothing in the game. It was absolutely bare bones and empty. It had some pretty decent combat. There were some frustrating elements and there were some external frustrating elements with the actual bugs and the popping, which could lessen the fun of the combat. But as a core feature, the combat itself was pretty decent. And you could start to have a bit of fun when you were chaining abilities, etc., etc. As regards to flying, it came with its pros and its cons. When you're actually up in the air, flying could feel fun. Having to constantly land to reduce your heat to go back up kind of feels why? You know, you got that, or if your character got anywhere near a wall and just happened to touch it, boom, bang, down you go to the ground. So flying had its own set of issues as well. However, the major problem, of course, was the content, the lack thereof, and what in essence appeared to be a complete lack of direction with the game. And this article essentially confirms that. Confirms why these problems were here. And Anthem was in development for approximately 6.5 years. However, when you go through the article and when you read through what the actual people who are working on the project had to say, in essence, Anthem was really only in development for a year. Maybe a little bit more because of the way that it was structured. And this is a story about woeful mismanagement. Now, I don't have a problem with games companies, you know, trying things, testing things, seeing what will work, seeing what will not work. Even Blizzard Entertainment themselves say approximately 50% of what we try and do just never even makes the light of day. It just gets cast away. And I think it's very important for a game developer to experiment. You know, you experiment, you could accidentally fall across something rather incredible. You know, you could run with an idea and it could blossom into something amazing. So, you know, that imagination, that sort of creativity has to have an outlet to play out. You know, it would be almost impossible just to say, this is a game, this is how it works, this is what we're going to do, bang. That's like utopia. You know, it's like just everything serendipitously falling into place. That's highly, highly unlikely to happen. But when it comes to Anthem, when you read about Anthem, it really comes across that the developers just didn't know what the game was. And it shines through with the finished product because a lot of us when we were playing Anthem, really just did not know what it was trying to achieve, what the actual game itself was attempting to be. Was it a looter shooter? Was it an RPG? Was it a squad based? You know, it just didn't feel as if it fit any holes, really. You seem to have this round peg and all the holes were square and you just couldn't get the damn thing in. And then, of course, to compound matters, which really, when a game comes out, is the biggest thing, it was bug-ridden. We had the ridiculous loading screens, of course. The story was pretty drab and dull. The characters were pretty drab and dull. It didn't really have any of that BioWare spark. When we've played games like Dragon Age Origins, or just Dragon Age games in general, to be honest with you, apart from the second one, I loved Inquisition and I loved Dragon Age Origins. And of course, the Mass Effect trilogy, the first Mass Effect trilogy, they are just stellar games with stellar characters. Or at least, with the Mass Effect trilogy, the first game, you could really see what they were attempting to do, and they did fail in quite a few ways, but it was what I called a flawed masterpiece. You could see exactly what they were attempting, even if it didn't quite pay off. And so when Mass Effect 2 came around, my God, they nailed it. They seemed to really identify alongside the gamer what issues they actually had and what they needed to improve on, and they implemented them incredibly. And Mass Effect 2, to this day, would easily be on my top 10 games of all time. No questions asked whatsoever. So would probably Dragon Age Origins, to be honest with you. So this is a company that knows how to do this. But on top of that, we get a story about the real creative people, the people who are behind your Dragon Age Origins, your people who are behind your Mass Effect trilogies, leaving in droves. And you also get a story about how the development team, the people who are actually working on the project, the smaller games, the people who you wouldn't even know, but still would be talented developers, just leaving in their droves at BioWare. So you have this huge amount of creativity leaving the company, and what is left, well, the management just didn't seem to have a clue what they're attempting to do. And they do say that Anthem could be the wake-up call that the company needs. But you have to look at Mass Effect Andromeda. If that wasn't the wake-up call that the company needed, I don't know what was. Because the game wasn't just flawed on a technical level. It wasn't just the ridiculous animations and the memes, and we'll get onto the memes in a moment, that were the terrible thing about Mass Effect Andromeda. The characters were piss poor. The story was nonsensical, non-interesting. The villains were drab and boring. Everything about Mass Effect Andromeda ultimately failed. All that it really had going for it was a semi-decent combat structure. But the bugs, the characters, the story, completely non-engaging. And for BioWare, that was incredible. A company that brought us, like I said, the Mass Effect trilogy, Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age Inquisition, games that were really full of amazing characters. But on top of all of this, we also seem to have a lot of interference from EA, and exactly how much influence EA played upon BioWare, putting teams in, dragging them away. Patrick Soderlund, who's no longer at EA, Patrick Soderlund, that might be a name that you recall. He was the one who called gamers uneducated when it came to Battlefield 5, when he was talking about the lies that they made up for the stories. Wow, pretty incredible. And then, of course, when that came out, there was a huge drop-off in pre-orders, and there was a huge drop-off in the EA share price, and Kel Surprise, Patrick Soderlund, suddenly left the company not long afterwards. Sure, that was just a complete coincidence. But he seemed to be quite relevant when it came to the decision-making process and what he wanted and what he didn't want. And they literally cobbled together, just before E3 2017, something for him to play. They reintroduced flying, that had been removed, and it kind of got the Patrick Soderlund seal of approval. So it was really when they released that 7-minute footage, which they showed at EA. It's EA. They showed at E3 2017. It was really that was the catalyst for what the game was to become. And really, they had nothing. They showed it off at E3, but they had nothing. So after E3, it was really, hey folks, this is what we're going to try and achieve. And it wasn't until a little bit later on that they got another head in to main the project. And at least they started to make some decisions. One of the reoccurring themes about the failure of Anthem was none of the management could make a decision. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. There seemed to be so much bickering, so many contrary ideas that they literally waited for people to see who would win out with their idea. And then it wasn't actually golden that the idea would come to fruition. It might not work. If you remember at the E3 2017, we had this massive dynamic weather system when they were going through that. Did that happen? No. If you also look at the E3 presentation, the way that they moved out of Fort Tarsis was seamlessly. There was no load screens. Is that there now? No. There was massive load screens. And the team behind Anthem literally said the E3 presentation was a lie. You know, it was an on-the-rails demo that was put together essentially for Patrick Soderlund. So when you were trying to suddenly then say, hey folks, this is what the game's going to be like, and then go back to the development team and say, okay, this is what the game's going to be about, you have this recipe for disaster. And it was even just a few days before that E3 2017, the game wasn't even going to be called Anthem. They didn't like the name. I think they were going to call it Beyond. But EA said there was going to be trouble trademarking Beyond. And so they opted for the name Anthem. Now, you could say, well, that actually makes more sense, as because Anthem is about the anthem of creation. Oh, yeah, that didn't exist. Then the anthem of creation didn't exist. They were given the name of Anthem, and then they had to work around that and figure out what Anthem was, what it meant to the game. And so there was mass confusion with the teams as regards to, well, what does Anthem mean? Because that isn't how the world was actually meant to be. The world was meant to be this unforgiving, crazy place that was in constant flux with its devilish creatures and unforgiving weather systems and all of that. And then suddenly it morphed into the anthem's going to become the anthem of creation and yada, yada, yada. So the short period of time that they had to actually get together some sort of story, some sort of gameplay, when stuff wasn't even coming together, it does feel like a miracle that they actually managed to do anything, to be perfectly honest with you. It does feel like it was unbelievable that the team managed to get together what they did. Now, management always had this thing about BIOWARE magic. This thing that it's within the company. It's a company thing. It's an in thing. Where everything just comes together. You know, if we work hard, if we just keep on hammering away, it's just going to come together. And it never happened when it came to Anthem. And then, ironically, if they think it happened when it came to Mass Effect Andromeda, then they got a lot to be desired, because it certainly didn't come together for that either. And returning to the meme thing, the Anthem developers said that they wanted Anthem to be unmemeable. Oh, too late. Too late, I'm afraid. And so, what was very interesting, I'll move on to now, is when the article released, almost immediately, a response came out by BIOWARE itself. A response to the article. However, Kotaku said that they sent bullet points of the article, but there was no way they could have read it in the time that it released, and then this came out. So this was actually a pre-scripted response to the article, guessing how it was going to be constructed, which actually makes BioWare come across as a wee bit salty, because we have this in the last sentence anyway. As a studio and a team, we accept all criticisms that will come our way for the games we make. However, they don't accept the criticisms that come their way because they've jumped the gun here. They've guessed how it was going to be, and they assume that it was actually a hit piece towards upper management. Now, whereas management names are mentioned throughout the course of the article, I mean, reading it, fair's fair. I wouldn't say that they were in any way cast as, you know, as targets. It just seems to be information which was handed down by the development team in good faith. And yeah, it came across as a bit salty, and because of the nature of the response was seen that way and perceived that way. And then, rather ironically, just recently, either earlier today or yesterday, yesterday morning, Casey Hudson, who's the head of BioWare again, after leaving he returned, he puts out this internal memo. This was obviously going to go back into Kotaku's hands. I don't know if he quite understood, but this article has been created by people who have either left the company and are happy to discuss this, but clearly people who are still at the company and are open to discussing this. Not all of this information could have possibly come from people who have just who have only left. There has to be people from within. And if they were willing to speak to Jason on the QT about it, they were clearly going to push this straight out. So this immediately comes out, and Casey essentially confirms that there are huge problems at BioWare. There are huge problems at BioWare. Problems with the way that they rag their staff, problems with the management, and he goes into, we want to do better, blah blah blah, and he gives it the kind of corporate rhetoric which we've all heard before. And he might mean it. It could just be rhetoric, but they'll discuss this further on. So I am kind of concerned for the future, and not necessarily I'm talking about the future of BioWare as regards to being shut down by EA. I'm more concerned about, because of EA's desire for constant live services, I'm worried about franchises for the future. I'm worried about Dragon Age 4, that it's just going to be designed around live service. It's going to be designed around microtransactions. It's going to be designed around cosmetics. It's going to be designed around that sort of philosophy, when Dragon Age 4 should just be single-player game. A single-player game, and then maybe have some DLC, some purchasable DLC to tell additional story if relevant, like there has been in the past, a la Witcher 3. But with EA's desperate desire to monetize everything for years and years to come, I just don't see that happening. And that in itself, to me, kind of contradicts the core of what Dragon Age is, which to me is a single player experience that should just be enjoyed by that one person, not teaming up with others, not getting a live service, not getting a bloody multiplayer nonsense or anything like that. So it would be interesting to see where these franchises eventually end up. But this is, well, after seeing the recent Joker trailer, this is a tragedy and not a comedy. As opposed to, it's not a tragedy and it is a comedy. But this isn't a comedy. This is a tragedy, and it does seem to be a tragedy of complete and utter mismanagement. People unwilling to make decisions. People unwilling to be steadfast to what the Anthem game should be. And we got exactly, based off what this article is about, we got exactly what we expected, which was a vacuous, empty game that doesn't seem to have a direction, that doesn't have any content because they really didn't have time to make any content because of the time that it had. And whereas they are optimistic at BIOWARE that they can turn this around, and I've just said this recently in another video, it's not impossible for it to be turned around, but at the end of the day, it's got to have a very specific direction. I don't think Anthem has a personality. You know, Destiny at least had a personality. Anthem doesn't have a personality. It doesn't have a great character list. It doesn't have a great premise. It doesn't really have anything going for it. So if they are to turn this game around, something unbelievably drastic has to happen. I mean, really drastic has to happen to give any hope of people sticking around, or what they really need, more people to come in. Because right now, it's just, hey, look at me, I'm shiny. And I don't think that's gonna last or keep people's attention for too much longer. And as regards to the sales of the game, whether or not EA hit their desired 6 million units sold, well, we'll have to wait a few months, couple of months to find out about that. But to me, it seems highly unlikely indeed. So yeah, what a comedy of errors, at least. At least that's part of the comedy at BioWare and Anthem, but it's easy to see why we got exactly what we got. So there you go, you got 2 AZChats in as many days. Well, a couple of days apart. But I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media and Twitch for live streaming. Links, they're in the description box down below. And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care. Bye for now.